They called him the Wrench. A grim, quiet man who fixed mail trucks in a tiny Virginia post office garage. Nobody ever asked where he came from, or why he kept a folded American flag on his toolbox. Until one stormy morning, when the new district supervisor tried to fire him for being too slow. That's when 5 men in uniform showed up. Not with lawyers, with silence. And something even more powerful. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to like the video. The garage behind the Arlington Springs post office was never meant to last 50 years. Its cinder block walls were cracked, the fluorescent lights buzzed like dying hornets, and rain leaked through the ceiling in 3 different spots. Still, mail trucks came in, broke down, got fixed, and rolled out again, like clockwork. And the one who kept the clock ticking was Walt Jessup. 68 years old. Heavy hands. Grease-stained flannel. Nobody ever saw him without a wrench in one hand or a thermos in the other. The younger mechanics whispered about him. Said he never talked. Said he never got angry. Said he kept a folded flag in a glass case by his toolbox. But no pictures, no certificates, nothing to explain it. Walt worked the early shift. Opened the garage at 4:45 a.m. Didn't speak unless spoken to. Repaired more vehicles in 1 week than anyone else did in 3. But he refused to take promotions. Refused even to apply for supervisor. Just here to keep things running, he'd mutter. Until one Monday morning, a man in a blue tie showed up. Ethan Price. District supervisor. Corporate transplant. Young, confident, and unimpressed. He stepped into the garage like he owned the air inside it. Why is this place still running analog reports? He snapped. Where's the floor manager? Everyone pointed at Walt. Ethan frowned. Him? I thought he was the janitor. Walt didn't blink. Just kept working on a broken axle, hands moving steady as always. That night, an email went out. Effective immediately, Mr. Jessup is suspended pending review of productivity and timekeeping inconsistencies. The garage exploded. He's the only reason this place isn't in flames. Are you kidding? He trained half the guys in here. Walt said nothing. He turned off his tools, wiped his hands, and walked out. The next morning, he didn't show up. For the first time in 27 years. That's when the phone call started. From someone in D.C. Then from a base in Quantico. Then, strangely, from the Office of Congressional Liaison. No one knew why. But 3 days later, 5 black SUVs pulled into the post office parking lot. Men in press suits stepped out, some in full military dress, others with old pins clipped discreetly to their jackets. They walked straight past the postmaster, past Ethan, right into the garage, and stood in front of Walt's empty workstation like they were saluting a grave. The men didn't speak. Not at first. One of them, broad-shouldered, older, his ribbons faded but precise, stepped forward and ran a hand across Walt's closed toolbox. He tapped the small glass frame above it gently. The folded flag. Still there. Still sealed. Beneath it, a single, etched brass plate read. To W.J., the one who never left anyone behind. Ethan Price finally spoke, voice sharp with confusion. Excuse me, can someone explain what's going on here? This is a federal building. The man in uniform turned. Son, he said quietly, if you don't know who worked in this garage, you've got no business managing it. The younger mechanics had gathered behind Ethan now, whispering. He's not just some mechanic. I told you, my uncle said he saved a general once. He was in the desert, right? Or was it Southeast Asia? Ethan scowled. That's ridiculous. He's been here forever. There's no way. The officer pulled a folder from under his arm, dropped it on the nearest workbench with a heavy thud. Inside, clippings, photos, declassified operation summaries. One showed Walt, much younger, but unmistakably him, standing beside a downed Black Hawk helicopter in flames. His hands were bloodied, his shirt torn, but he was smiling. Smiling while carrying a soldier on his back toward a medevac chopper. Another showed him inside a makeshift field hospital, welding part of a transport under fire. Caption, Forward repair under hostile contact, Operation Red Anvil. A third was a citation and signed, unawarded, never presented, for an act of valor that saved 11 soldiers pinned in a ravine after an ambush during Desert Storm. Ethan blinked. He was Special Forces? No, said the officer. He was maintenance. Logistics. The guy everyone forgot until everything broke. And when it broke under fire, Walt fixed it. Another man added, he's the reason half our unit got home. Someone else, he drove 5 hours on broken ribs to deliver parts so a convoy wouldn't stall in enemy territory. The postmaster appeared, breathless. What's happening? Who are all you people? We're the ones who survived because of Walt Jessup, said the lead officer. Then something strange happened. Each of the 5 reached into their coats and removed dog tags. They placed them in a line on the workbench. Each one bore different names, different units, different dates. All of them had something in common. Recovered, W.J. Jamie, a clerk who'd worked the front desk for 4 years, stepped forward. Why didn't he ever say anything? The oldest officer smiled, sadly. Walt never wanted attention. He wanted systems that worked. Engines that didn't quit. People who came home. That's all. Later that day, Walt showed up at the edge of the parking lot. Quiet. No tools. Just his thermos and a worn duffel bag. When he saw the men waiting by his station, he didn't flinch. He just walked up, looked at the tags, and said, "Didn't think you'd keep those." The lead officer grinned. "Didn't think you'd stop working long enough for us to hand them back." They saluted him. Walt didn't return it. He never had to. If you believe some heroes wear oil instead of metals, type respect in the comments. Who do you know that never asked for thanks, but deserves the world? Share their name below. Has someone in your life done quiet, unseen work that saved everything? Honor them in the comments. If you believe not every veteran needs a parade to prove their worth, share this story. Type never forget if you agree that legacy is built one silent act at a time. The next day, Arlington Springs woke up to a mystery headline on the front page of the local paper. Who is Walter Jessup? And why did 5 military units show up to defend a mailman? There was no photo, no quote, just a grainy black and white image of Walt's toolbox, the folded flag inside its case barely visible behind a haze of garage light. By noon, the post office parking lot was full, not with trucks, with people, old veterans leaning on canes, kids with handmade signs, journalists from out of town sniffing around the edges, trying to find someone, anyone who could explain how a mechanic could stop federal proceedings with a glance from 5 strangers in dress blues. Inside, Walt was back at work. Same tools, same flannel, same silence. But now, every time he touched a wrench, people noticed. Ethan Price tried to call a meeting. Image control, he told the postmaster. We need a narrative. The postmaster shut the door in his face. Later that week, a woman arrived in a dusty brown pickup truck. She wore sunglasses, combat boots, and a faded veteran's cap. She walked into the garage, stood quietly by Walt's station, and when he finally noticed her, he froze. Jamie, the front desk clerk, watched the moment from across the room. "Marie?" Walt asked. She nodded once. He didn't speak, just placed a hand over his heart, like she was a ghost he'd only dared remember in silence. Marie turned to the rest of the room and said, "I was the first woman in Echo 4 logistics. They said I wouldn't last a week. Walt kept me alive for 8 months. He taught me to weld in a war zone, built me a heating rig out of 2 broken Humvees and a mess tent pole. He never took credit. But if I'm standing here, it's because of that man." Someone clapped, then someone else. And soon the garage filled with something stronger than applause. Gratitude. That weekend, someone started a website. Waltworks, the man who fixed the forgotten. Veterans began sending in testimonials. He taught me to change a transmission under sniper fire. My first command failed. He picked up the pieces literally. I was broken. He handed me a wrench and said, "Fix something." That saved me. Jamie printed the entries, taped them to the break room wall. By Monday, they covered 3 panels. By Wednesday, 6. That Friday, Ethan Price left town. No farewell memo. No goodbyes. Just gone. Replaced quietly by a woman named Colonel Sharp, retired Army, who asked one question during her first visit. "Where's Walt?" He was under truck 14B, realigning a suspension bracket. She slid under with him, got her hands greasy, and said, "I read about Red Anvil. You ever think of writing it down?" "Nope. Mind if someone else does?" He looked at her. "Depends. On what? On whether they make it about me, or the guys who didn't get to come home." She smiled. "That's fair." That night, someone added a small plaque above Walt's station. In this spot stood a man who rebuilt more than engines. No cameras, no speeches. But the next morning, 3 retired mechanics from 3 different wars showed up just to touch the wall and say thank you. If someone helped you through the hardest part of your life, type respect in the comments. Who in your world keeps everything running while asking for nothing? Honor them here. Have you ever realized too late what someone truly meant to a team, a place, or a life? Say their name now. If you believe some of the best stories are hidden in grease-stained coveralls, share this. Type never forget if you agree quiet work deserves loud gratitude. It wasn't a holiday, but the post office was silent that Thursday morning. Walt hadn't shown up. His station was untouched. The flag still sat beneath the glass. The tools aligned perfectly. The calendar above his bench still said April, though it was June now. Jamie was the one who noticed first. She asked around. No one had seen him leave the night before. His name wasn't on the VA's hospitalization list. His phone rang to voicemail. She took a deep breath and checked his locker. For years, no one dared touch it. The combination was written in faded pencil on the underside of a drawer he'd once fixed. She entered it slowly, almost reverently. The door opened with a soft metallic creak. Inside wasn't much. A flannel shirt. An old cassette player. A battered paperback novel called One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. And a thick, duct-taped envelope labeled, "Open only if I don't come back." Jamie stared at it for a full minute before touching it. When she finally did, her hand shook. She called the postmaster. He called Colonel Sharp. Together, they opened it at the break room table. Inside, photos, documents, notes, some typed, most handwritten. The first page was a list of names. These are the ones I didn't save. Next to each name, a location, a date, a note. Martinez, water convoy, sandstorm strike. Lee, bridge collapse, held the beam while the others crossed. Daniels walked back into fire to reset the evac line. Never came out. Then, underneath, tell their families. Don't let them vanish like I almost did. The scrapbook continued for 28 pages. It documented operations no one had ever heard of. Redacted names, coordinates, call signs. But woven through it all were hand-drawn diagrams, repair sketches, and field modifications, mechanical brilliance designed to keep others alive. A folded letter was taped to the inside back cover. It was addressed to Jamie. She read it aloud. If you're reading this, I either forgot to wake up or finally followed someone into the dark. Either way, thanks for asking questions. You're the first person in a long time who looked past the wrench. Keep fixing what's broken, even when it's not made of metal. Colonel Sharp stood in stunned silence. She whispered, "This is a military archive." Jamie looked up. It was in a locker, next to an Ivan Denisovich novel. By sundown, the garage was full again. This time, not with media or officials, but with families. One by one, people came, looking for names, looking for stories, looking for pieces of someone they lost and maybe, through Walt, found again. Jamie created a new wall in the break room, not for Walt, but for the names in the scrapbook, the ones he didn't forget. And beside each photo or entry, a simple line was added. If you know more, tell us. We'll write it down. Because Walt didn't want a statue. He wanted their stories to live. And now they would. Have you ever found something that changed how you saw someone forever? Tell us below. If someone once helped you, even quietly, type respect in the comments. Say the name of someone who never got the credit they deserved. Let them be seen. If you believe legacies live in quiet places, like lockers, notebooks, or wrench-stained hands, share this story. Type never forget if you agree every forgotten name deserves one more chance to be spoken. 2 weeks later, the Smithsonian called. Not the press office. The National Museum of American History. They'd read the transcripts, seen the scans Jamie had uploaded, copies of Walt's diagrams, the photos, his field notes scribbled in grease pencil on ammo cartons and ration boxes. Most people, the curator had said, don't understand how much war depends on what doesn't break. Jamie flew to D.C. with Colonel Sharp. They brought Walt's binder. It traveled in a sealed carry-on, wrapped in cloth like a holy book. Because to the people who had read it, who had felt it, it was. At the museum, they were met by a man named Dr. Theo Marks, an expert in wartime engineering adaptations. He handled the binder like it was a living creature. This, he said softly, belongs beside Alan Turing's machine notes. Not because of who he was, but because of what he did with nothing. He pointed to a sketch labeled, Field Cooling Rig, improvised from MRE spoons and exhaust tubing. This shouldn't have worked, he said. But it saved 4 men from heat stroke in Kandahar. And that was just one page. The binder was filled with what military techs later called Jessup hacks. Dozens of them. Simple, brilliant, efficient. Solutions made under fire, without blueprints, using what others would have thrown away. Jamie realized something that day. Walt hadn't just saved lives. He'd changed the rules of survival. Back in Arlington Springs, word had spread fast. Someone from the Pentagon had shown up. They didn't ask questions. They didn't try to reclaim anything. They simply stood in the garage, removed their cap, and nodded at the locker where Walt's flannel still hung. A few days later, an unmarked crate arrived at the post office. Inside, a bronze plate, mounted on thick oak. The inscription read, "For innovations that save the living. For silence that spoke more than metals. For Walter Jessup, master of machines, guardian of the forgotten." It was bolted into the wall above his station. Below it, someone, probably Jamie, had taped a photo of Walt holding a wrench, mid-repair, unaware of the camera. On the back, he didn't pose. He fixed. Then something else happened. People started sending things. A crankshaft from a Humvee fixed in Mosul. A piece of shrapnel that once jammed a transmission, removed by Walt using a penknife and a prayer. A photo of a tent heater he made from a wrecked drone battery. Each came with a note. "I didn't die because of this." By midsummer, they'd filled a glass display near the break room. The staff called it the Jessup Archive. Unofficial, untouched by curators. Open to all. Jamie added a rule. If it was built in silence but saved someone loud, add it. People came from out of state just to see it. Not to cry, to learn. One teenage mechanic asked, how did he know how to do all this? Jamie answered simply, he didn't. He refused not to. That night, Colonel Sharp quietly nominated Walt for posthumous recognition from the Department of Defense. Not for valor, for innovation. Because the man rebuilt more than engines, she wrote. He rebuilt possibility. And in garages, tents, and bases across the country, quiet hands still use his tricks. Still turn his wrenches. Still whisper his name. If someone's small action once had a giant ripple in your life, type respect in the comments. What object in your home holds more meaning than most will ever know? Describe it below. If you've ever learned from someone who didn't teach with words, leave their name here. Share this if you believe genius doesn't wear a suit, it wears oil. Type never forget if you believe the best inventors don't ask to be remembered. They just fix what's broken. By autumn, the garage at Arlington Springs Post Office had changed. Not in layout, not in color, but in weight. There was a kind of reverence now, not just for the tools or the bolts or the clattering chain of the overhead lift, but for what it all meant. Because every socket set felt different once you knew what had been done with them. Every oil-stained rag might have been part of history. It was Jamie who started the next phase. She called it the Legacy Project. Every Thursday, she recorded oral interviews with veterans who'd worked alongside Walt, some in war zones, some in motor pools that were war zones in their own way. They told stories no one had heard, fixes that shouldn't have worked, people Walt had trained, encouraged, scolded into excellence. One man, Staff Sergeant Reuben Knox, arrived in full uniform, even though he was retired. He held up a photograph. "I was going to quit," he said. 2004 Iraq. Everything I touched fell apart. My CO said I wasn't cut out for combat logistics. I believed him. He passed the photo to Jamie. Walt and Reuben, kneeling over a busted generator. Walt pointing, Reuben nodding. That night, Walt pulled me aside. Said, "You don't fix machines. You fix problems. Stop thinking with manuals. Start thinking with hands." I stayed. Became division lead. I teach now. And I tell every one of my cadets, don't worship the wrench. Wield it. Then he added something. He didn't just leave behind tools. He left blueprints. Inside people. The quote went up on the wall the next day. A week later, a convoy of old colleagues arrived unannounced. 8 men, 3 women. All dressed casually. All veterans. They brought a gift, a steel case. Inside, Walt's personal toolkit. Not the one from the garage. The one he carried through every deployment. Every wrench custom ground. Every ratchet slightly off-standard, marked with paint. None of us wanted to keep it, one of them said. Because none of us could do what he did. But someone should see what brilliance looked like. Jamie took a breath. This belongs in a museum. They shook their heads. No, this belongs here. So it stayed. In a glass case. Tools arranged not by size, but by order of urgency. Walt's system. Then came the veterans' kids. Young, curious, full of questions. Jamie launched a mentorship program. Every Saturday, older vets taught basic mechanics to the next generation using Walt's notes. They didn't call it a class. They called it Fix It Hour. But it was more than bolts and belts. It was about wiring confidence. About passing memory through muscle. About never letting silence steal legacy again. Walt would have hated the attention, but he would have loved the work. He'd always said, "The loudest sound I ever heard was a machine refusing to die when someone still needed it." Now, in that garage, amid clinks and hums and low laughter, he lived on. Not as a name on a plaque, but as motion, as rhythm, as force passed forward. If someone once gave you a skill that shaped your whole path, type respect in the comments. Have you ever touched an object that felt like it carried more than its weight? Tell us what it was. Who taught you something you still use every day? Say their name. Let them be heard. If you believe mentorship is the most powerful legacy, share this. Type never forget if you agree that real blueprints are built into hands and hearts. Walt never liked ceremonies. He used to say, "If I did something worth remembering, you'll remember it without a podium." But Arlington Springs remembered, and they remembered loud. It started when a retired four-star general named Collins requested a site visit. No press, no cameras, just him, a quiet aide, and an unmarked car. He spent 43 minutes in the garage. Didn't say much. But before he left, he walked up to Walt's old station, placed a challenge coin on the bench, and said, "For operational brilliance under unrecorded fire." He left without another word. The coin stayed. Next week, the mayor called. "We'd like to do a formal dedication," she said. Jamie hesitated. He wouldn't have wanted that. I understand. But maybe it's not for him anymore. Maybe it's for all the ones like him who never got the room to be known. And so it was set. Not on Veterans Day. Not Memorial Day. A random Wednesday. Because that's when he worked, Jamie said. He never waited for occasions. The day came. Not a cloud in the sky. Over 300 people showed. Not out of obligation, but out of memory. Mechanics wore jumpsuits with patches Walt had designed in the field. Veterans wore custom shirts reading WWWD. What would Walt do? Kids held handmade signs. He fixed more than engines. Colonel Sharp led the ceremony. No pomp, just truth. Walter Jessup was the kind of man who didn't care if anyone saw him work, as long as the work got done. He saved people not with speeches, but with socket wrenches. He didn't just repair what broke. He taught others how to keep it running. That's not just service. That's legacy. Then she stepped aside, and Jamie took the mic. She didn't cry. Not then. She just told the story of the first day she asked him what kind of oil went in a cracked filter. He looked at me like I'd asked something dangerous. Then he smiled and said, "You're asking the wrong question. What matters is why it cracked. Fix the why, not just the what." That answer changed my life. She turned to the crowd. And now we carry the why. Then something no one expected happened. People began stepping forward, one by one, holding pieces of what Walt had fixed. A mail truck belt, a soldered motherboard from a drone, a handmade bracket from a desert hospital. Each person said a name, a date, a memory. Each object carried a life Walt had extended. One man broke down holding a single bolt. "This," he said, voice shaking, "kept my convoy from flipping in a monsoon. Walt carved it out of scrap metal in under 2 hours. If he hadn't, I wouldn't have made it home." They called it the fixer's line, and it didn't end until nightfall. The garage lights stayed on, not because of policy, but because no one wanted to leave the place where Walt had stood. That night, someone placed a wrench in the center of the bench. Not rusted, not polished, just used. And beside it, they taped a note. "Still fixing. Still needed." Have you ever stood somewhere and felt someone still working, even after they were gone? Tell us where. If someone once gave you hope using nothing but their hands and their patience, type respect in the comments. Say the name of a mentor who never asked for thanks, but deserves the world. If you believe stories like Walt should be part of every history book, share this. Type never forget if you believe a wrench, in the right hands, can be more powerful than a weapon. They never officially retired Walt's position. Instead, the Arlington Springs Post Office changed his title in the system, from lead mechanic to W. Jessup, ongoing influence. No one filled his station. No one touched his tools. And yet, somehow, the garage ran smoother than ever. Not because the machines stopped breaking, but because the people who fixed them believed differently now. Jamie found herself becoming something Walt never said he wanted, but always prepared someone for. A teacher, not in a classroom, in Greece, in elbow-deep repairs, in questions answered with questions. One morning, a new recruit named Chase asked her, "What if I mess up?" She handed him Walt's old torque wrench. Heavy, worn, then said, "Then you fix it." That's what he'd do. They got to work. And something extraordinary began to unfold, not in headlines or press releases, but in ripple after ripple. A tech school in Nebraska started using Jessup hacks as part of its training curriculum. One professor wrote, "This isn't just mechanics, it's philosophy." A military engineering unit launched an unofficial internal award called the WALT, given to soldiers who solved field issues creatively without protocol and saved lives doing it. And the Smithsonian? They made the decision permanent. The Jessup Field Kit became a cornerstone exhibit in their forgotten frontline section. Not under war heroes, under inventors without patents. That winter, Jamie was invited to give a talk. Not in a grand hall. In a garage. Army base in North Carolina. 50 cadets. Cold as a bayonet and twice as sharp. She told them about the wrench. The silence. The notebook that changed everything. One kid raised his hand, maybe 19, face streaked with oil. "Why do you think he never talked about what he did?" She paused, then said, "Because Walt didn't fix things to be remembered. He fixed them because someone needed to keep moving. If we stopped every time something broke, we'd never get anywhere." The room was silent. Then someone whispered, "He sounds like the kind of guy who saved the world one washer at a time." She smiled. Yeah, exactly that. When she returned to Arlington Springs, the town felt different. Not in layout, but in memory. The wall in the break room now had over 100 testimonials. The fix-it hour had tripled in size. And Walt's bench? It was now framed in soft lighting with a placard that simply read, "He's not gone. He's just under something, fixing it." On the first anniversary of his passing, Jamie unlocked the locker one more time. Not to take anything. To leave something. A fresh notebook. The front page read, "For the next hands. Keep writing." That night, the power went out during a storm. The garage filled with darkness. Then, backup lights kicked in, low, humming, homemade. Built from Walt's original generator sketch. They glowed steady. And the work continued. Because in Arlington Springs, engines never truly stop. They just wait for someone like Walt to pick up a wrench. If this story left a mark on you, type respect in the comments. Have you ever met someone whose legacy didn't need a spotlight to shine? Say their name. What's something you fixed or someone who fixed you that changed everything? Share it below. If you believe greatness doesn't always wear a uniform, but always shows up, share this story. Type never forget if you believe every bolt tightened in silence deserves a roar of thanks. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let YouTube promote stories of kindness.